I'm going to show you how to install the Hughs Handbuilt XS650 CDI kit. So this is a complete kit for all years of the XS650. Upgrades you to a modern permanent magnet charging system and ignition system. Uses a modern solid state CDI box, solid state regulator, single ignition coil that drives both plugs. And it's not too hard to install, so I'm going to go through it with you, show you how to do it. Here's the pieces we got here. Hughs installation instructions and tips. We have our flywheel here, and we have a flywheel puller for this guy. We have our stator here, so we've got all of our charging coils on the stator. We have our ignition coils to drive the ignition system. Different hardware bags, stator connectors. We have a relay for powering the coils, woodruff key, your timing sticker, mounting hardware, that kind of stuff. Got some new spark plugs. We have our mounting plate for the stator, and then we have the mounting plate to mount the whole stator assembly to the crankcase, as well as the pulser coil. Wiring harness here for the CDI box, kill switch, power the coil. Hardware for the CDI box, grommet, wiring harness, that kind of stuff. We have a MOSFET regulator here, which is an excellent regulator rectifier unit in one. It's all solid state modern technology, so it's a nice upgrade. CDI box and coil. So that's all the pieces here. I'm going to go over to the bike and I'll show you how to get started. Okay, bike we're using for the video here is a 1980, I believe, XS650. This is a TCI ignition bike, so it's a factory electronic ignition bike. And similar to Hugh's instructions, if you read through it, he's starting with a bike with all the charging and ignition stuff stripped off of it. So I'm doing the same. I'm not going to show how to disassemble everything. This bike already has the original flywheel or rotor, I guess, charging rotor removed, the stator and the stator cage is removed, as well as the TCI ignition pickup. I've removed the battery box, as you can see, and mounted to that was the TCI box was mounted underneath. We had a voltage regulator, it was mounted down here. So those guys are gone, and everything's unplugged. Still has all original wiring harness and connectors and everything. I went ahead and pulled off the cover here, showing what on a points ignition bike would be the points cover. So you can see that's already removed, just to show you what it looks like. And then you'll see first step in Hugh's instructions will tell you if you still have the pin down here, the locating pin for the original stator cage, you need to remove that. So I have already pulled that guy out. You can easily pull it out with a pair of pliers or locking pliers or something. It comes out easily. So that guy's already off. You will need a flywheel puller like this to pull the original rotor off, which you can get online easily. And I've also removed the original woodruff key that was here. We're going to use the new one with the kit. So all that stuff's removed, and we have a bike that is ready for the install. So first step coming up. Okay, so I went ahead and installed the new woodruff key. You can see it here. Have the slot facing up, and put some thread locker on it, some Loctite, red Loctite on it, to hold it in place. And just so you take a look at the mounting plate here, make sure you look at the relief cut into the pulser coil bracket here to clear the oil passage. So that's got to go against the motor. So line that guy up, and then I'm going to get some thread locker on the other mounting bolt and use the 16mm bolts and go ahead and thread them in and get the mounting plate snugged up. Alright, now I went ahead and mounted the stator mounting plate, so lines up evenly with the 3 bolts here. These are the 14mm bolts. Make sure to use some thread locker on those as well. I still have them loose, so the plate is adjustable, so I've just got it set to about the middle of the adjustment range. Make sure you have it oriented as such as well in relation to the pulser coil bracket, so you can see which way to put it. So now we got that on, and we'll get to work on the stator. Alright, so you can see here I've got the pulser coil mounted to its mounting bracket here using the small hardware and the lock washers with it. And then I've got the stator mounted to the backing plate, and I've got all the wires routed about towards the grommet exit here. So next I'm going to get these guys routed safely around the stator poles, and I'll show you how I did that once I get it done and tied up. So coming soon. Alright, so I've got the stator wiring done, the pulsar coil wiring done, as well as everything run through the grommet. So I'll kind of show you how I did it. There's a lot of ways you can set this up, but the key is to keep all the wires routed tightly on the stator and away from the outside edge here where the flywheel could rub them. As well as you need them pulled pretty tight here along the top of the coil so they don't rub on the inside top of the flywheel. So what I did was just kind of routed everything nicely so it all exited in about the same spot. And I don't have great lighting here, but I'm going to kind of try to show you how I routed it. So you can see I've pulled everything together here, I routed it over the coils tightly, and I've got everything pulled together here with a small zip tie that holds it kind of back against, close to the center of the mounting plate, and that'll keep them plenty out of the way of the flywheel. Then you can take advantage of this notch here and run them back here because there's plenty, even with the stator plate snug down, there's plenty of gap here. And the pulser coil wiring, you have a nice spot here to kind of run them down the edge. So keep as much of the sheathing on them as possible to protect them. I've got another tie here that pulls everything together just before the grommet, and you can see everything runs nicely through the grommet and exits here. And make sure you leave enough slack so you can rotate it throughout its range and not rub anywhere or be pulled too tight. So this is all tied up nicely and looks good, and that's about it for the wiring. Alright, now I've got the sheathing back on the stator wiring harness now, so I've got the cloth type sheathing down here at the grommet end, and then I've got the rubber sheathing butted up against it with some heat shrink to keep it together, and this guy's now ready to be routed. Going to go ahead and crimp our terminals onto the stator wiring harness here. Show you how to do that. Now take time here because this is a critical step, and especially for the reliability of your system. No point spending all the money on a nice setup like this and then not making sure the crimping on the terminals is perfect, because this is an easy spot. They can fail, the wire can pull out of the terminal, you can have a short, a lot of bad things can happen. So take your time. If you don't have them, it's really worth getting a set of double crimp pliers or a tool like this. RM Stator sells them. They're excellent. Make it really easy to do. So here's what you need for the stator wiring harness. Your 4 wires going to the CDI box are the red and the green guys. You've got a solid red, solid green, and then you've got a striped red and a striped green. Those are going to be these guys here. Okay, they all get a rubber sealing boot behind them that will be crimped into the back of the terminal here. That's what the taller edge is for, and that seals out any moisture from the back of them. Your 2 yellow wires here are your charging output. They're going to go to the voltage regulator. Those guys get a female bullet connector like this. So you want to slide on the black rubber sealing tube behind it that insulates the terminal, and then they get crimped the same way, same type of crimp. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and strip the wire back a little bit so I get a good connection, and then I'm going to get these crimped, and then I'll try and show you the a good crimp as soon as I have these done. And this here is your rubber seal for the front of this connector here. Okay, so here you can see about how much I've stripped the wire back and twisted it together. Okay, and here you can see a good crimp. So you can see the inside edge, they're doubled over on the inside and pressed against the wire. And I also have the back of the crimp doubled over and pressed against the insulation. So that holds it really tightly in place. You want to make sure you pull on the terminal when you're done and make sure you can't pull it off. You need to make sure it's a really solid connection. So that's what they're supposed to look like. Alright, now for these guys, you can see about how much I've trimmed the insulation back and got it twisted together, ready for a crimp. and then here you can see a good crimp. So again, you can see that it's doubled over on both the inner and the outer row, and you've got the wire pinched down real well. You can also see where the rubber sealing boot is pinched under the outer row here. So that'll give you a good seal and a good tight crimp. Again, you want to pull on it and make sure that it can't pull out at all. So that guy's good. I'm going to get the rest of these finished up. Alright, so I went ahead and grabbed the CDI box. That'll show you how to line up the wires in the connector. And they're real simple. They just push in from the back. Make sure you kind of have the locking tabs on them facing up towards the locking tab on the connector itself. And they just push in until they click. So there's not really any secret. It's easy to do. Make sure you have your rubber sealing boot installed. You can see it there. And then you just match them up with the CDI wire. So solid red to solid red, solid green to solid green, and striped wires also. So I've got those guys installed in the plug. Plugged it in to make sure I got a good tight fit. Everything looks good. So that's it for my as far as my stator terminals and crimps go. That's all good to go. So at this point, you're about ready to start figuring out where you're going to mount stuff on the bike. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video because I'm going to be using this bike for some testing other parts. And things are going to get moved around. So that's up to you. I am going to go ahead and get the regulator and coil and everything set up and show you how it all goes together though. So we'll move on to that in just a sec. So here you can see the voltage regulator rectifier. The hookup on this guy is real simple. You have a longer wire with a ring terminal and red heat shrink on it. That goes to your battery positive terminal. This guy grounds through the housing, so you need to either have a good frame ground where you're mounting it, or you do need to run a ring terminal and wire from the mounting location here to your battery negative, just to make sure you have a good connection. You do need to crimp on the male bullet connectors, so I've got them here and the rubber boots. Those go on the two shorter wires here that both have yellow dots on them to show you that's the stator connection. And those guys, of course, are going to be plugging into your two yellow wires with female bullets coming from the stator. So I'm going to get those terminals crimped on so I can hook this up. Okay, you can see here I've got my crimps done on the male bullet connectors on my regulator. And those guys are now ready to plug into the stator connector here. So that's all done. Alright, so I've got my stator mounting plate snug down here, so it's tight. And you can see I've got my key installed, so I'm going to go ahead and put the flywheel on. Now if you look at the inner diameter of the flywheel, you'll see the keyway cut into it. And so that guy's got to line up with the key inside. So that's where that Loctite comes in handy to hold the key in place as you slide it on. So you want to try and eyeball it, line it up as straight as you can with the key, and then slide it on, and you notice the magnets will kind of suck it into place against the stator. So wiggle it around a little bit till you get it lined up and slide it all the way in, and then you want to go ahead and get your lock washer and nut on and hit it with the impact gun, or Hugh has the torque specs in his manual as well. I don't recall them off the top of my head. So I'm going to get that done and show you what it looks like. Okay, got the flywheel on, lined up with the keyway, and went ahead and hit it with my impact gun, tightened it up. So that's all ready to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the timing marker installed. So I'll get that out, get it installed, and show you in just a second. Okay, I've got the timing tab installed loosely with the three bolts here and the lock washers. So it's not adjusted at all yet because I need to find top dead center on the motor. So the manual goes over a lot of different ways to do that. I'll leave it up to you to find. I'm going to go ahead and find top dead center so I can get this set. Alright, so I've got the motor at top dead center, and I'll just show you a quick way to check. I don't know how easy this is to see, but I've got the piston at the very top of its rise right here, so I know it's at top dead center. And I went ahead and put the side case back on so I can make a mark after I put the sticker on. So here's the timing sticker. It goes on the little plate right here once you remove the outer cover. So I'm going to put that on, and then I'm also going to make a mark, I'm going to draw and then file a mark on the flywheel itself to line up with the top dead center mark. Alright, so you can see here I got my sticker installed, and I've got a mark here on the flywheel itself with scratched with a file and then marked with a Sharpie over it to correspond with the top dead center mark. So that way if the sticker ever comes off or anything, you've got it marked here. Okay, so with the cover back off, I'm going to set the timing tab. So what you want to do is get yourself some needle nose pliers and hold the little feeler gauge here. You want to slide it in and press it till you touch the edge of the metal sensor, the magnet inside the pulser coil there, so you can feel the stop. Okay, so then you want to line up the edge of the timing sensor there. You can see I'm pretty close. Line it up exactly with the edge of the feeler gauge and then snug it down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, all done there. I got it tightened down and I have my gap set right. Now the other thing you need to do is turn the motor over until you have your tab underneath the pickup coil, and you need to set the gap there correctly. You're also going to use this feeler gauge to do so. So I'm going to do that next. Okay, so you can see here I have the timing tab directly under the pulser coil, and obviously I'm a little too close here. This is just too tight of a gap. So to start, I'm going to loosen the pulser coil mounting bolts and see if I can get a little bit of play in it. They're fairly tight, but I'm going to see if I got a little bit of play in it and I can line it up that way. If not, you'll actually have to tweak the tab with some pliers or screwdriver just a tiny bit and make sure it's completely even on both sides. You don't want one of them offset. So I'm going to do that next, then I'll show you what the correct gap looks like. Okay, so I got that set, and I was able to set it with just the adjustment in the pulser coil mounting itself. So now you can see if I slide through, I've just got a tiny bit of drag on it between the magnet and the timing mark. So that gap is set. And I tightened the pulser coil back down with the correct gap. Alright, going to go ahead and install the new spark plugs that came with the kit. Make sure you gap them at 0.04 inch, just like Hugh's instructions say. So I've got those set. I'm going to go ahead and install both of those guys. And then I'll show you the general hookup with the wiring harness and the coil and regulator and everything. And that'll be it for this video. I'm not going to show you a specific wiring installation because there's a lot of different ways to set this up with or without a battery. But this should give you a great idea how to install the kit. Alright, new spark plugs installed. Now I'm going to show you the basic hookup for everything. Everything's going to be loose here, so let me get everything plugged in and then I'll show you where all the connections are. Okay, so we've got everything sitting on the bike, and I'm going to show you where all the wiring is. I have the wiring harness attached. So I'm just going to go over the different connections and show you what's what. We'll start with the stator here. Here's our stator wiring harness, and we already went over these. Here's your 2 yellow charging coils from the stator that are running to the voltage regulator. And like I explained before, I don't have the regulator battery connections made, but here's your battery positive. And also, like I mentioned, your battery negative is made through the mounting of the regulator housing itself, so that needs to be a good frame ground. And then we have our ignition coils from the stator. The pickup coil and the source coils are in the 4-pin plug here, and those guys are plugged into the CDI box, which I have sitting here. And then we have our CDI plug. This is basically the wiring harness from CDI, 2 coils, and then your kill switch. And I also have Hugh's relay harness plugged in here just to show you how to do it. So I've got that attached. The instructions detail all the hookups for the relay, so I'm not going to go over that. But that's attached. Mating plug here at the CDI box. Have it run to both terminals of the ignition coil. And then, just to illustrate, I have one of the coil plugs attached. So that's really it for the wiring harness on these things. There's not a lot that is actually required for the charging and ignition system. Obviously, you can do a lot of work if you want to tie it into your stock harness and use a stock kill switch, or however you want to do it. So I'm not going to go into any details on those. So that's the wiring setup, showing you where the connections are. Now I'm going to get this bike started, and we'll show you what it looks like when it's running. Alright, so everything's hooked up here, kind of a mess, but everything's wired up for the charging and ignition system, and it runs great, so we'll fire it up and show you what you get. Alright, hit it. So here's showing charging voltage. Rev it up a little bit, Dan, to 4,000. So it starts easily. It'll start in 1 or 2 kicks. Fires right up on the electric start. So you get awesome ignition and charging system in one package, and that's about it.